Hello everybody, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Siegfried Schott, I'm Technical Director of SIA Experts, and today we are going to talk about the next big step of Universal Plant Viewer, the new or upcoming Universal Plant Viewer NT. And by the way, that's an internal development name and might change to something boring like version 7. Not finally decided. So today I will talk a lot and you will see a lot of slides, but I also try to show you a little bit of the current development status. So I've stolen a version from our build server. Don't tell my developers, but I try to show you also something live. As always, this session will be recorded and we will provide you a link in the next few days. And finally, if you have any questions, so don't hesitate to use the question panels and type it in. At the end of the session, I will try to answer as much questions as possible, and at least I will answer them via mail. Okay, so let's have a look at the agenda. So I will talk a little bit about the history, where we come from and why we did things like they are today. And then I will go through the main upcoming features, and at the end, as I said, I will answer your questions. Okay, history, where do we come from? So the grandfather of everything was a software called 3D PDF Engine. That's, I guess, at least 15 to 18 years old. And it started as a software to have smaller things like a pump and, let's say, 10 pipelines in a PDF file. And over time, we made it more and more capable. And in the final stages, you could really place a whole building, including all piping and equipments, into one PDF file. But it wasn't enough. All our clients requested to display bigger models and bring more into it. And as PDF is somehow limited, obviously, we looked around and thought about what can we do. And the idea that came up at that time was to use a gaming engine to display industrial plants. So we decided for the Unity gaming engine. And in 2013, the first prototype running on an iPad was coming up. We showed it to several clients, asked them for their needs, and even if mobile was fancy at that time, everybody told us they need the viewer not on mobile devices. They need it on their PC where they work all day. So finally, we did the first release 2014 and switched to the Unity browser plugin for Chrome. So that's how it looked at that times. And unfortunately, 1 year after that release, Google announced that that kind of plugin will not be supported any longer, and even Unity disannounced their plugin. So we did the first change in technology, or the second change from mobile to browser plugin, and then we had endless discussions. Finally, we decided to use the native Unity framework, which allowed us to build versions not only for Windows, but also native versions for mobile devices. So that was the birth of the technology that's today behind Universal Plant Viewer. And version 3, you see it looked a little bit different like today. Today we look more like that, and that appearance came with version 4 2018. And then we were constantly more concentrating on not on the front end, more on the back end of the data handling, improving speed, stability. So version 5, version 6, which is out today, came 2020. But we won't stop. End of 2021, I think in December, we started first work on UPV NT. And that decision was the biggest invest in SIA Experts history ever. So it was really, we decided to redo UPV from the basis up. And the first big change is a new GUI system. And why do we do this? So that's how it is today. And simply it's handmade. So at the time we started UniversalPlantViewer, there was no GUI system provided by Unity. So we had to do each and every button by ourselves. And that lead to some inconsistency. So one developer did it a different way like another one. It's like if you are growing software, that's things that happen, and it's static. So we cannot change the appearance. So if we want to have the button bar, let's say on the right side, it's really hard coded. So we have to dive deep into the code and do it hard coded. And so it's not very flexible. So Unity a few years ago announced their own GUI system, and we decided to use that as the basis for the UPV NT. So we use the Unity GUI system. It's a common class structure, so it's a more modern approach. We were now doing it with good programming practice. So all buttons inherit their color from a master button, for example. So if we now want to change colors, we can easily do it. We can easily rearrange buttons. We can totally change the appearance because everything is based on a CSS-like approach. If you're a little bit in website design, you know what a content style sheet is. So it will easily change. So here is what it will look like. And I'm pretty sure your question will be, why does it look the same if you use a new GUI system? And that we had endless internal discussions of if we immediately should change the GUI, and we decided first change the GUI system and then over the time improve our GUI and our usability. But make it easy for you as a client so you don't need to get used to a totally new UniversalPlantViewer. So you will find your controls at the same position like you are used to, and then with the next upcoming version, it will change more and more and will get more user-friendly over time. Okay, next big step, window manager and multi-window. So as you see here, it was not possible before to have different documents side by side. And the simple reason was, as we used a gaming engine, it was designed like a game. And in a game, you usually are in one game and you play that game. And you usually don't switch between different documents or side by side. Switching was possible, but it was not possible side by side. And we now implemented a window manager, which enabled a multi-window feature. So you can have multiple views open at the same time, like you see it here, 3D, PNID, or documents, and panels can be rearranged. So let me show you this. So that's the current development stage. Looks quite similar to the current version, but you see here that the search bar now is an own panel. So files attributes like you know it, but search is also a panel. What I easily can do, I can grab that search panel and place it on top of the other two. And now let's say I search for D100 and we don't want to go to the name, we want to go to the IntelliPit and all pipelines that coming from that equipment. I click on it and you see the PNID opens at the same position as it did before, but I can grab it and place it on the right side of the 3D view. And now if I zoom a little bit out, you see here's my equipment I searched for, or let's search for D240. And now I search for the item tag, equipment item tag, and here you see my equipment is here. Or if I zoom a little bit out, I can select all that, select the matching parts in a 3D view and filter them in the 3D view. So now you see everything that I've selected in the PNID is also visible in the 3D view. Or if I want to have both PNIDs that I opened up side by side, I can just drag that over there, and now I can view my two PNIDs in a side by side and maybe follow through an offline connector. All that's possible with the new multi-window system, and gives you a better overview over your data. Okay, so let's close this and go back to the presentation. Okay, next big step are app controls, and that's the third level of customization. So what do I mean with that? So the first level was we allow you with our SDK to modify your model during creation. So one of our standard examples, and you can also download it from our webpage, are those line number labels. So those were created by the builder in the moment you create your final UPV model. And the SDK gives you the ability to add additional graphics. It gives you the ability to bring in additional attributes, maybe from an outside data source, to manipulate attributes or attribute names. All that's possible with the SDK. So that's the first step of customization. So the next step we introduced was our API. So in the meanwhile, we have a very broad range of API commands that allow you to integrate UPV into your software. And with your software, that's can be your software. You click on buttons in your software, and the viewer changes it colors. You can zoom, you can highlight objects, you can filter objects just via API commands from your software. And that's available for both the web version and also the local version. But very often we've been asked, can we modify UPV, or can I as a customer have my own special functionality inside UPV? And as we won't maintain several different versions of UPV, the answer was always no. But now with the app controls, we allow you to bring in your own controls, your own functionality into UPV. So if you have special needs for UPV as the visualization tool of your choice, you can now, with some programming knowledge, you can build your own controls based on web technologies. You can now enhance the functionality or tailor it to your needs. You can also then hide controls here so that your end users only have that controls that they need with the additional functionalities you want to give them. So let me try to see where is it here. Okay, how does it look like? So the app controls I can select here. Let's do that example. And again, it opens up a new panel, but I can just place it at the bottom. So it can be viewed parallel to the attributes panel. So you are very flexible now. And the health, safety, environment zones here, for example, let me show where the safety shower was placed, which space it occupies, and here it is displayed in the plant. Or I can show everything. And that data is not held in the model, it's just a small database behind or an Excel sheet, whatever you like. So, but it's integrated into UPV. It will run on all devices, also on the mobile devices. So you can now build your own functionality inside UniversalPlantViewer. And that's, I think, a big step forward for you. It allows you to create, in the end, your own flavor of UniversalPlantViewer. Okay, so with the app controls, you will be able to access all the available API commands. Here is a list of all the API commands we provide by now. There are some more, but you get a feeling. So you can set camera views, you can select links, you can get object attributes. All those things you can do with a viewer, you can also do via the API. But again, also that API is grown over time, so we will introduce API 2.0. And that API will be more structured in a tree-like approach. So also think about multi-window. If you have two PNIDs open side by side, you cannot handle this with today's API. The API 2.0 will allow you to also handle those cases because you can address which of the open drawings you want to address with the command. So what's about your existing customizations and programs? Don't worry, we will not kick out the existing API. This will still exist in the future, so we will not delete it. The API 2 will give you a more structured second approach, and maybe you can change your software over the time to use the API 2.0. It's a more consistent way to address the internal functionality of UPV. And for sure, the app controls will have full access to that API, so you can really drive UPV from within your app controls. Okay, what's that? That's a big data bucket. You know our data folder. So there are a lot of files in, even some files for customizations like report definitions, custom attribute definitions. Everything is in that data folder. And when we designed UPV initially, it was meant as a viewer, but over time, more and more functionality came in that is a little bit more like a viewer. Think about custom attributes, markups, can include screenshots. We can have spraying for laser scans. All those things are more and more complicated to handle if you are using a file system. So we decided to switch to a database. And that will be, let's say, the second big step. So the first new version of UPV NT will have the functionality up to the app controls I showed you. This will be in the first release. The database will come a little bit later. However, the development has already started. There are development versions out, so it's always already heavily in development. And the reason is it's just the base for further enhancements. So think about dynamic linking between 3D, PNID, and documents. So you don't have to run the builder again. If you want to link objects, you can just select it in 3D and PNID and do the linking. Common attributes. So you might have, if you have linked objects, you might have attributes belonging to 3D, you might have objects belonging to PNID, but why don't see the PNID attributes also if you are in the 3D views? So that will be possible once we have a database and we have access to all those attributes from one unified source. Also collaborated work. So maybe multiple persons can access the exact same model and work on the same database. Also that, to enable such kind of work, you will need a database instead of a file structure. Or think about incremental models. By now, you generate a complete new model each night. But wouldn't it be cool if you can go back in time and see in the model how things were 2 weeks ago and compare what's new in the last 2 weeks? So all this requires a database, so we can, on a more modern way, have our data organized. Next thing is multiple source models. So today, if you have a model consisting of different parts, like the model, the red one, the green one, if something changes, you will run the builder again. Once the database approach is ready, we will build in the possibility to merge different models into one viewer. So imagine about you have a laser scan, which is most times very static, and you have your planning, which changes every night. Then you can just only process the laser scan once, open it up, and load the current planning state into that laser scan model. So you don't have to recreate the whole plant each night. And when we talk about multi-source models, why don't include other sources like map data or GIS data? Directly access those data and merge it into the model. So those things are on our roadmap and will be implemented in the future. Okay, that's most about the viewer. There, we have also our UPV Web Services, and also we are working on enhancement of the web services. So will be Web Services 3. And that will bring you a central repository. So you don't longer have to upload your models onto the different render servers. You just load it into a central repository, and the web services care about of distributing those models. Also, along with an advanced load balancing. If you have multiple render servers, the web services will then handle the load balancing in an even more clever way than we do it today. We are thinking about a session store. So starting a session now, having maybe colorized some objects, included some custom attributes, and then store that session, close it, and later the day open it up again and work at exact the same position where you stopped working in the morning. And also, if you have some map or GIS data, think about a map view for plants. No longer selecting your plant out of a list of plants, but visually selected from an overview. Okay, so challenges. So we have identified one big challenge, and that will be the switch from the file-based versions to the database-based versions. Those will be not backwards compatible. So by now, each version we release can also handle the file version from the previous release. That will not be possible when we change to the database approach. It will take some months, sure, if we come to that stage, but for a certain time, we will run two products in parallel. So I don't see anything we can avoid it, but I'm pretty sure we can handle that, and you as a client will then have just two software versions, one for the older plants, for the database, for the file-based plants, and one for the database plants. That will come. And another thing is, say goodbye to 3D PDF. So we will not support creating 3D PDF anymore, because it will be complicated more and more to create those 3D PDFs. Even handling of 3D PDFs nowadays is a pain with all the security restrictions. So there is little request, and we will not support it anymore.